It's that time of year again, and what better way to get into the spirit than to watch some Simpsons Christmas specials? Well, actually, it depends which ones you watch. So I've taken the liberty of watching all of them so you don't have to. Here's my ranking of every single Simpsons Christmas episode. At number 16, we have White Christmas Blues. The episode starts with Bart saying, "When did everything turn to crap?" This probably wasn't intentional, but it perfectly summed up the episode. Marge sets up a B&B due to the hike in the cost of living, but things get out of hand, as she should have expected. Small plots were scattered across the episode, which can sometimes be effective, but ended up being unfunny filler. Sorry, I don't think I have anything positive to say about this episode. At number 15, we have A Springfield Summer Christmas for Christmas. The priority of the Simpsons writers these days seems to be simply to stay on trend with what they perceive as modern culture. A big city girl comes to Springfield to film a Christmas movie. She then falls in love with Skinner because he remembered her ridiculous coffee order. I honestly don't know if the show's poking fun at this or what, but regardless, the characters are annoying, the jokes don't land, and there isn't really a plot whatsoever. The only reason I watched the whole thing was because I was trying to figure out why I recognised her boyfriend's voice. At number 14, we have The Nightmare After Christmas. The episode has the lowest IMDb rating of all on this list, but I bumped it a bit higher because, as the ratings suggest, it was rather polarising, and personally I didn't find it as boring as some of the others. Ultimately, it's about Krusty attempting to strengthen his relationship with his daughter, but his way of going about it was by becoming Christian. I'm not one who's very clued up about religion, but seeing as there wasn't any humour in it, it seemed rather unnecessarily insensitive, as they weren't attempting to make a statement of any sort either. At number 13, we have Kill Gill, Volumes 1 and 2. Perhaps one of the most hated oldish Simpsons episodes. In Kill Gill, Marge invites Gil Gunderson into the house after Lisa inadvertently gets him fired. He is a horrible houseguest and overstays his welcome massively. I can't speak for why other people dislike this episode, but personally, I simply can't fathom why Marge would cause so much inconvenience to herself and her family over something this ridiculous, especially considering that she has authority, and any sensible person would easily be able to say no. At number 12, we have Bobby It's Cold Outside. Sideshow Bob tries to prove to Bart that he is, in fact, good now. To do this, he helps the Simpsons catch whoever's been stealing everyone's UPS parcels. Not much to this rather strange plot, but at least this episode was slightly less insufferable than the previous ones on this list, minus the Baby Shark rendition. At number 11, we have The Fight Before Christmas. As with Simpsons Christmas stories, which you'll see higher up the list, this episode shows 3 Christmas tales. There's not much to say about them, but they're certainly far more coherent than some of the other episodes here. At number 10, we have I Won't Be Home for Christmas. This episode is rather heartwarming for one of the later seasons. Homer spends Christmas Eve at Moe's to stop Moe from feeling lonely, but Marge jumps to conclusions and kicks him out the house. He has a moving moment with Flanders and discovers how lucky he is to have his family. When Marge realises her mistake, she and Homer reunite. Although, again, the story is a bit weak, we get a glimpse of a more caring side to Homer, which is much rarer in the later seasons. At number 9, we have 'Tis the 30th Season. Once again, Marge helps out Gil, thus setting the Simpsons on course for another awful Christmas. This time, however, they take a trip to Florida to try and make Marge happy. There are a handful of laughs throughout the episode, and it ends in a sweet way, earning it its rather high ranking for a late Simpsons episode. At number 8, we have Simpsons Christmas Stories. The episode features a trilogy of stories. One's a jazzed up version of the birth of Christ, one's about Abe and the war, and one's about Homer finding a present. Nothing that stands out too much, just classic naughty Simpsons. What I did like about this episode is that unlike others where Christmas brings out the worst in Marge, she shows love to Homer, not minding his forgetting of her present. At number 7, we have 'Tis the 15th Season. Everyone is fed up of Homer's selfishness, and after buying a present for himself, Marge kicks him out of the bed. He watches a Christmas Carol parody, so decides to do some good for the town. Flanders gets jealous and tries to outdo him, but this is rectified when Homer misinterprets Lisa's advice about material goods. Although this episode very much felt like they chopped up some old ones and threw them together, it was still much funnier and more coherent than episodes further down the list. At number 6, we have She of Little Faith. As another religious episode, this one is perhaps a bit controversial. After the church commercializes to make money, Lisa gets fed up of Christianity and discovers Buddhism. The rest of the episode entails Marge, along with the church, trying to trick Lisa back into Christianity. This may have got on plenty of people's nerves, but I think it was a thought-provoking episode, and I respect that they took a risk over it. At number 5, we have Miracle on Evergreen Terrace. It starts off with Homer stealing presents from the Try and Save, which you'll see is ironic later on in this video. Anyway, on Christmas Day, Bart wakes up early to open presents. He accidentally burns up the tree and lies to his family, blaming a burglar. The town all chip in out of generosity, but when they find out the family lied and blew the money, they're shunned. The Simpsons then learn the true meaning of Christmas when all their stuff is taken, and they're forced to enjoy each other's company. At number 4, we have Grift of the Maggie, as I believe is the British pronunciation. When the school closes due to lack of funds, a toy company exploits the children in order to design the perfect Christmas gift. It was an entertaining episode and an interesting take on the commercialization of Christmas, while still ending pleasantly and avoiding the sappy, overused Christmas messages. At number 3, we have Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire, the very first episode of the proper show. After Burns doesn't give him his Christmas bonus, Homer is forced to get a second job as a mall Santa. Although the foolish man we're familiar with, we see him trying his best to make his family happy. Towards the end, he and Bart go to the dog track and adopt the slowest dog, Santa's Little Helper, and the rest of the family are thrilled. At number 2, we have Marge Be Not Proud. The bullies pressure Bart into shoplifting the video game he wants from Try and Save. He gets caught and banned from the store, lying to his parents about it. When he's forced to go back to take a family photo, Marge finds out and gets very upset, but doesn't yell at him. Bart learns his lesson by feeling outcast from the family, and makes up for it by paying for a photo of himself in full. This episode actually has a sensible story arc, not to mention the fact that Marge is presented as a reasonable mother, as opposed to the irrational, useless woman writers have turned her into. At number 1, we have Holidays of Future Past. The episode is set 30 years in the future, and despite all the new technology, the family is still encountering all the usual relationship problems. Bart and Lisa learn some strong lessons about parenting, and the whole family spend Christmas together. You'd need to watch the episode to see why I've ranked it so high. After watching all 16 of these in succession, I feel like I've now turned into quite a Grinch. Evidently, the Halloween episodes are much better written. I imagine some of this may have been quite controversial, but I don't mean it to be. Which was your favourite? Let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe to let me know if this is the kind of content you want to see. And if you enjoy cartoons, definitely check out my other videos, as I make my own animations and would be so appreciative if you could help me kickstart what I love doing. In any case, thank you for watching.